All right, this video is two common failings of discipleship, both narcissism and burnout. And in this video, we're wanting to identify narcissism and burnout as two common failings in discipleship and in church leadership models, and then to explore how seeing discipleship as a web can actually help guard against these two common failings. And so again, we're going to be discussing these two kind of negative consequences of this top-down model of discipleship and how seeing discipleship then as a web can actually help guard against those two things. And the two failings that we really want to focus in on is narcissism and burnout. And so let's dive into those two things. You know, we mentioned in the first couple of videos that we need to stop thinking of discipleship as this kind of top-down model where me, the discipler, imparts all of my wisdom and knowledge on you, the disciple. This model inverts the horizontal relationship that we've been using into a vertical line with you at the top, and well, hopefully it's actually Jesus at the very top, although I've definitely seen discipleship without Jesus at the top. But it's Jesus at the top, and then you, and then all the people that you're discipling who hopefully will begin discipling others along the way somewhere. The problem that we see with this model is the line only points in one direction. And we believe that Scripture shows the discipleship to be a two-way street, better illustrated by the horizontal line, where in certain seasons of the discipleship relationship, we will certainly be helping guide and walk people to a deeper understanding of the way of Jesus. But it's also incredibly important to allow yourself to be discipled by the people you are in relationship with. You know, we too often assume that we have all the answers for someone less spiritual, when in fact, oftentimes, and I would actually be so bold as to say every time, God is going to use that same person that you are discipling to teach you something about yourself and about God. And we need to start paying attention to that kind of thing. Do you all remember the story of the two men who are walking on the road to Emmaus at the end of Luke's gospel? Jesus has just been raised from the dead, but these guys didn't know, or at least fully believe that yet. And so as they're walking, they're discussing everything that's taken place over the past 3 days, and then probably all the things that Jesus had been talking to them about up until this moment in time. And they come across this man who we know to be Jesus, but they don't actually recognize him as such. And so Jesus asks them in Luke 24, verse 17, "What are you discussing?" To which they're like dumbfounded and basically ask, "Have you not been paying attention the last few days?" And they begin to tell Jesus about, well, Jesus and everything that has happened. So these men knew Jesus, and yet they were filled with a moment of doubt and confusion. And yet even in their doubt and confusion, they were telling this man that they didn't actually know was Jesus. They're telling Jesus about Jesus. See, there are times when we forget that we are not perfect, that we don't know everything, and we too often experience moments of doubt and uncertainty, right? We experience those, and yet those moments don't stop us from sharing Jesus with others. The moment that you believe that you have everything all together in your life and that is what qualifies you to disciple someone else is the very moment that you're going to begin to find yourself going down the path of these two common failings in discipleship. Discipling someone, it doesn't require your perfection. It requires your willingness to share your pursuit of Jesus with someone else. And so notice what happens in this story as those two guys keep walking with Jesus, who they still don't know is Jesus. And I love that about this. Jesus begins to tell them everything about himself, starting with Moses and the prophets. These two men wanted to share a moment of Jesus' life with this man they came across, and that they still needed to be discipled themselves. And so Jesus steps in and he starts doing the work of discipleship. So how does this moment help us unpack the two most common failings of discipleship? Because the moment that we forget that we need to be discipled is the moment that we start heading down the path of either narcissism or burnout. Just because you are discipling someone doesn't mean you yourself don't need to be discipled. And so let's unpack these two briefly. And so first, narcissism. Narcissism is an actual mental health condition that can be diagnosed, but it's also a learned condition that can be adopted. Narcissism is an unnatural and excessive interest in oneself. There is a ton of psychological information out there that you can look at to really help you understand and identify narcissism when you see it. From things like grandiosity or an excessive need for admiration to a superficial and exploitative relationships. And one of the most egregious forms of narcissism in discipleship is seen in discipling someone else to be with you, to become like you, and to do what you do, rather than helping them to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus and to do what Jesus did. See, discipleship is never about making someone else into your image. It's about you and another person working to become the image of Christ together. The unfortunate reality is that a lot of the qualities that it takes to be an impactful leader are the same qualities that, if not guarded against, can lead to narcissism. And because of that, narcissism has become a deeply rampant problem within some churches and some pastors in our world. Many of the downfalls that we have seen in large churches around the world were inherently abusive structures and cultures that stemmed from a narcissistic personality of the main leader. From guys like Mark Driscoll to Bill Hybels and countless more people who may not have been born with this narcissistic tendency, but over time, as you're helping people and leading, there can be a propensity to develop narcissistic tendencies. And so that's the first failing. But how do we guard against this first failing? Well, I think there are three main ways that we guard against narcissism in our discipleship. First, you acknowledge that you could fall into the trap of making discipleship about yourself. So I was in a spiritual leadership class in grad school, and the professor was talking about pastors having affairs, right? And it's a terrible thing. And he said the first way to guard against affairs in your marriage is to acknowledge that you could actually have one. He said this is not an admission that you will have one, but what tends to happen is that people who fail to admit that they could tend to be the ones who actually do have affairs, because they fail to set up boundaries. And so first, we have to acknowledge that narcissism can and could grab hold of you and me, right? But second, we have to be willing to learn from the people that you're in a discipleship relationship with. They have something to teach you about Jesus. Compare this to this top-down model illustration, which naturally reinforces narcissistic tendencies, versus the web illustration, which naturally dissipates those same tendencies. And then finally, and most obviously important, we need to make the discipleship relationship about Jesus. So that's the first common failure. The second common failure is one that I see all the time, and it's burnout. You know, I'm a part of a pastor's group in Seattle that meets once a month to pray together, and there's between 25 and 30 pastors who attend this. But without fail, at any given moment, 75% of those pastors claim to be experiencing burnout. And what's the reason for this? You know, as I've listened to them and come to know them, I've realized that their view of discipleship and leading their church does not allow for them to form a depth of friendship and relationship with their people. They use that kind of top-down discipleship approach, which means that they have to always be seen as perfect, the ones with all the answers, and they never allow their people to nurture and care for them. You know, in people experiencing burnout, you're going to hear the language of things like, I'm lonely, and I'm tired all the time, I have no friends. Some people will tell you that you can't be friends with people that you're discipling or leading. And this is just simply flat out wrong. Remember, discipleship is you and another person connected by Jesus, both growing closer to Jesus, which also is growing you two closer together. Friendship should be a natural result of a discipleship relationship. I heard a local pastor here talk about how much he and his family have sacrificed to do ministry in Seattle. He said, "My wife has not had a friend in 14 years. And that's how much we've sacrificed for this work." And I just thought, man, how sad is that? We should never wear a lack of friends as some kind of badge of honor, revealing how spiritually sacrificial we are. This winter, my wife and I were starting to feel a bit stretched, so we asked 4 other couples from Missio, our church, to join us on a retreat for a weekend. We played games and we had fun, we told stories, and I think they actually expected for me to, at some point, do some little speech or devotional thought, but I kept telling them that I wasn't going to do anything like that. I had one special thing that I wanted to do, but otherwise the weekend was about being together. Well, I got to Sunday morning on that retreat, which was the last day that we're going to be together, and they all looking at me like, we're running out of time. What are you gonna be telling us? And I just told them that the last 2 years, which this was during the harshest time of COVID, I told them that their friendship these last 2 years, without their friendship these last 2 years, I wouldn't still be in ministry. Ministry was difficult, but because of a depth of friendship, here we were. Feelings of challenge and difficulty are natural in ministry and discipleship relationships. You will experience those moments of exhaustion and uncertainty, but it is the depth of relationships that you have set up that will lead you through so you don't burn out. Every one of those couples that was at our weekend retreat that I have been discipling those couples for the last 7 years, but they needed to know that they have discipled me as well. Again, look at the the discipleship web and all the avenues you have for support and encouragement as you're pursuing a tough calling. So how do you avoid burnout in discipleship? Well, there's 3 things. First, you acknowledge that you are not the superhero in another person's life to solve all of their problems. Jesus is the hero of our story, and he will bring healing and wholeness. Second, you allow yourself to be vulnerable with the people that you're discipling. They need to know what a real life of faith with Jesus actually looks like. We say a lot at my church that we are all at different places on our journey of faith, but we're all headed in the same direction together toward Jesus. And then third, discipleship should be fun. It should be serious, but it should lead towards friendship. If you are trying to disciple someone that you don't like and have no intention of liking, out of a sense of duty, then you need to stop and get out. Discipleship leads to friendship. The discipleship web has been so important for our own spiritual health and our ministry. It's guided us through a city that is still carrying a heavy burden in the wake of Mars Hill and churches like it, and it has provided the support to carry us through some really tough years that frankly saw a lot of churches closing. In your next assignment, you're going to be taking the time to write down your own discipleship web that I hope will be a valuable illustration for you throughout your years of ministry.